Hello, this is KK from Mind IT. Today I'm going to talk about some of the measurements of pre-sales organizations. Um, Firstly, why do you need measurements? Like every other function, you want to be able to set measures that will help drive the performance of the function, number one. Number two, you also want measures which are then linked to the overall goals of the organization. And like every other function, therefore, pre-sales also needs to have these measures set in place so that it can be tracked, it can be measured, it can be reported on a regular basis, and most importantly, feedback that can then go into the overall functioning of the function and necessary tune-ups and changes that can be made. So going back to the basics of why a pre-sales function has been set up is simply to help the organization win business. So one of the simplest and easiest measures that you do want to have for the pre-sales function is the win ratio. Um, uh, and we'll go into the details of how the win ratio gets measured. The second area is in terms of what's called as a capture ratio. And the capture ratio helps you measure the currency in which the wins have taken place against the proposals that have been submitted in that particular currency, whether it's US dollars, Indian rupees, euro, are all possible ways to measure this. And finally, the pre-sales function needs to be measured in terms of its efficiency. How efficiently is a pre-sales function operating is also something which is crucial to take into account. So let us look at the three key measurements for pre-sales function. We talked about the win ratio. We talked about briefly the capture ratio, and we talked about the efficiency of the pre-sales measured by cost per bid. So briefly, we'll go into each one of this. So when we look at win ratios, what is a win ratio? Win ratio is simply the number of proposals submitted to the number of proposals won. So this ratio indicates how well you're winning various opportunities. So if you won 3 opportunities out of 10, obviously your win ratio is 30%. Here again, there are other finer nuances that do come into play, which is many times there's a long lead time between the proposal submission and the actual decision being taken, many times running from 6 months to right up to 24 months. And during this period, the client has not really taken a clear decision. So you could have win ratios where the client has taken a clear decision, and also have win ratios where the decision is still very dormant. Both ratios are useful to track. Here again, win ratios can then also be further subclassified by geography, by domain, by technology, and all of those. And each one has its own role to play given the size of the organization and the spread of the organization. When it comes to capture ratios is all about the value of the proposals won to the value of proposals submitted. So for example, you could have submitted 3 proposals, you could have won 3 proposals out of 10, and those 3 proposals might have a value of, let's say, $10 million, and the value of the proposal submitted could be $40 million, in which case your win ratio is 25%, and I'm sorry, your capture ratio is 25% and your win ratio is 30%. So which is better, having a higher win ratio or a higher capture ratio? Which is better? Well, both has its own place in terms of measurement and tracking. Clearly, in this particular case, it looks like you're winning more of the smaller deals versus a situation if the capture ratio is higher than the win ratio, you're winning the more larger deals. So which is better? Well, there is no clear-cut answer as to which ratio is better. It all depends on the state of the organization. In a growth phase, you want to be able to have a higher capture ratio because you want to be able to pursue the larger deals and help the organization grow much faster. But remember one thing: larger the deal, you are potentially also getting into larger risks, chances of higher failures, potentially bad press. All those are part of the territory of winning larger deals. Whereas if you're an organization where bulk of your revenues are coming from a few customers or a few clients, then you might want to look at de-risking your organization dependency on these few clients and spread your risk through acquiring more clients with smaller deals, for example. So it's an equally good strategy. So there is no absolute measure to say which one is better than the other. It all depends on the organization context. Finally, the cost per bid also plays a significant role in the measurement of pre-sales functions, because remember one thing: pre-sales functions by nature are a cost center and operate on a fixed budget. And typical of every organization, and especially when budgets remain fixed, the expectation is that they are expecting more for the same. That means for every $100 spent on the pre-sales function, if you're churning X amount of proposals, they want that to be increased from X to delta X. So the efficiency part of the pre-sales function is very important, and this in turn is likely to drive a number of initiatives within the pre-sales functions around better skills enhancement, bringing in proposal automation, looking at a better management of content, the boilerplate content especially, which all drive efficiencies within the pre-sales function. And why is this important? It is important because the more efficient the pre-sales function is, it leaves them more time to focus on the win, which is what contributes to the win and capture ratio. So each one of them does have a sort of a relationship with each other, and hopefully this gives you an idea of how pre-sales function should be measured directly with business outcomes. There are, of course, other input measures also that could be looked at, including things like how many hours were spent on training, how much of boilerplate content was used, how much of midnight oil was burned. I mean, a whole lot of measures that can be put into place. But please bear in mind that you don't want to end up in a situation where you have measures which leads to analysis paralysis. So that's what would be my recommendation, and hopefully this will help you drive more meaningful measurements for the pre-sales function. So we looked at the imperatives for well-functioning pre-sales function. What I would also strongly recommend is to define these imperatives for your own function and propose this to the key stakeholders within the organization. This could be sales, this could be your management, this could be your business unit head, whoever is likely to have a significant say in it, and also likely to be controlling the budget. The reason being that many times pre-sales functions don't get measured the right way, and instead of being in a reactive mode, it's better to go proactively and suggest some of these measures to your organization and demonstrate that that you're prepared to be measured, one, and two, you are prepared to live by it, and also continuously keep improving on it. I think that will set you up for a good strategic role within the organization. As I also mentioned, there are other measures as well, which determines how well the pre-sales function is organized. Some of these other measures could be in terms of content usage. How often did you have to escalate either for resources or for key decisions on a particular bid? How well did you did a particular proposal, adhere to the process, adhere to the internal timelines. Also, how often did you have to burn the midnight oil to put together proposal responses? Are all measures that can be incorporated within the pre-sales function. But remember, every such measure has its implication within the function, in the sense that people become that much more conscious, number one. Number two, ultimately your function gets determined by the kind of measures that you put in place. So it's important to think through these measures carefully and determine how it's going to benefit the pre-sales function and the organization as a whole, and based on this decide on a strategy to put these measures together. I hope you like this video and look forward to your feedback. Thank you very much.